Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel where we do painting tutorials. I start by coloring the horizon line with some cadmium orange and I apply it rather thickly there and I use less and less pressure as I move upwards. Because I will be making a gradient sky, so I want all of my colors to transition smoothly into each other. On that space where I used very low pressure, I apply some dark chrome yellow, and again I use less and less pressure as I move upwards. For a top, I use phthalo blue. I applied rather thickly on the top and focus especially on the edge of the tape to make sure I get everything there. And I use less pressure as I move downwards as I approach the orange and the yellow, because if I were to apply it rather thickly there, orange and blue are complementary colors, meaning they neutralize each other and they would make a brown or gray or black, which I don't want for my sky. Then I place a piece of tape under the sky so the sky does not bleed into the ocean and the scenery I will have going on later on. On a scrap piece of watercolor paper, I do random patches of my blue and orange that I'm going to use in a bit to make some clouds. I activate my sky going from the yellow towards the orange. Then I clean my brush thoroughly and I go from the area where I applied my blue the lightest towards where I applied it the thickest. Then I clean my brush again and I unite the orange with the blue. That way I don't get that muddy color I mentioned. And on the scrap piece of paper, I mix a lot of the blue with just a small amount of the orange, and I use this to paint some random cloud shapes on top of the sky while it is still wet. That is very important because that is how we will get those dramatic, fuzzy, diffused clouds in the sky. Then I take just a bit of the orange from that mix and I apply it on top of the clouds to make them look like rain clouds or thunderstorm clouds. Then I take off that piece of tape right there very carefully because we absolutely do not want it to rip our paper here. We need the paper to paint on top of it. I leave about a millimeter or two gap between the ocean and the sky because the sky is still wet and I am an impatient person. And I start doing random zigzag shapes on the ocean with my phthalo blue, and in the areas I left empty I use cadmium orange. I want all of the colors from my painting to be reflected on the ocean because that's what water typically does, it reflects light. So I'm just adding all of my oranges and the blue. And for the bottom of the ocean where it's approaching the beach, the sand, I want it to be mostly orange, so I do a very light layer of cadmium orange right there. I take a new piece of tape, I tape it to myself so it loses its stickiness and it doesn't rip my painting, and I place it on top of the clouds to get that nice crisp horizon line. Then I take my watercolor brush and I mostly dry it on the napkin before I activate my colors with it. I want to be pretty much on the dry side, like barely wet, because once it's almost dry, it starts skipping bits of your painting and it leaves these white lines that look like were sparkles or shimmers, and it's just an easy way to fake paint a body of water. A water body. I'm not sure how you say that. Then I just take away that piece of tape, and while the ocean dries, I take my phthalo blue and I underline all of the clouds in the sky to make them a bit more contrasty, to add some sharpness, some more detail to them, and just make them more dramatic because that's how I like my sunsets. So I just very lightly apply the blue beneath all of the clouds, very lightly. I'm not pressing at all, I'm just letting the pigment in the pencil do its own thing here. And then for the top of the clouds, I do the same exact thing, but with orange. So blue on the bottom and orange on the top. Once the ocean has dried, that sounded weird, I get my blue and I do some waves, basically just straight lines, on the bottom towards us, towards the viewer. And the final one that is closest to the end of the page, I make it slightly more wobbly to look more like a wave, but the rest I just make 2 or 3 straight lines, like half a centimeter above each other. And I'm doing this very lightly a couple of times, and then I use more pressure with the tip of the pencil to get that nice crisp line. It's going to make more sense once I activate it, and it's going to give a lot of depth to our waves. And I also add random hints of orange, because why not? For the sandy beach, I chose some yellow ochre, so I just cover everything there with the ochre. And I want to darken it up because this is a bit too much on the yellow side. For that, I add a small amount of blue on top, but yellow and blue make green, so I neutralize it with more orange. That way I get a nice light brown color, but not too light, because it is a sunset and it doesn't make sense to have perfectly golden sand on a sunset. I underline my waves once more with the blue. I take my brush with barely any water on it and then go over those details I just did. I go over on the waves and then I go under them and I blend the yellow ochre, and you can see it's starting to make more sense. It's starting to come together as a painting. While that dries, I take my black, I sharpen it to a nice fine point, and I start outlining my base sketch I had on my page before starting. I just go over the lines, nothing special here, and I'm going to cover it rather thickly with black. A friendly suggestion I can give you is once you sharpen your pencil, do the outline first and resist the urge to color everything as you go. So like you don't outline a tree and then you draw everything in the tree and then you sharpen your pencil again to get a fine point and then you do the next tree. Because that way you end up losing a lot of material. You end up wasting a lot of the pencil, which can be expensive, so it's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it like me, but it does make life a bit easier. And like always, there is going to be a traceable to this video available at my Patreon page, Sunshine Arts, and this is also going to be our monthly full-time narrated step-by-step tutorial. I actually do those on Patreon as well if you want to check it out. Sunshine Arts, shameless self-promotion. And like always, all of the supplies and the reference picture will be linked down below in the description box. While I color on the bottom, like the ground, I leave some blank random shapes, maybe some squares, some rectangles, some I don't know what, but I leave some empty gaps, that way you can see the sand and the ocean peeking through the leaves and the foliage. And I don't strive to get everything perfect. I don't cover everything 100% smoothly, that is why I have a brush. So once I color most of my drawing with black, I take my watercolor brush with barely any water on it, and I just go on top of the white bits of the paper that you can still see peeking through, and just make it a bit more saturated and a bit more contrasty. Lastly, I get my black to a fine point again, and I do a very subtle shadow under my closest wave with the black, and then I also color those empty blank spaces in the palm trees with orange. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my Patreon supporters for the month of April, and thank you all for watching. If you found any value in this video, please let me know by liking, commenting, and subscribing to my channel. We will see each other in the next video. Bye bye!